Is there anything that you feel contractors do wrong and it can be corrected, whether it is their perspective or the use of data and the metrics overall?
I would say that the number one thing that contractors are never great at is simply communicating and answering the phone.
Are there anything that you can tell these contractors from your experience that if you are starting out, then these are the things that you need to be looking for?
You're running your business just based on how the insurance company is paying. You have to be prepared for, I would say, at least 3 to 6 months of just runway to make sure that you have enough to pay the bills and cover everything. They do not manage their money appropriately, and as soon as it comes in, it's right out the door. You certainly cannot do that in insurance claims, and you really cannot do that. I would say this is probably an advantage for a contractor, but there's only so many things that you should be tracking when you are a contractor, right? There's not too many metrics that you need to pay attention to in order to be successful, but certain things that maybe they're not thinking about, like how quickly they answer the phone. No, I was just going to say, so managing your finances, I think, is the number one thing that contractors need to plan for if they're going to be serious about growing any sort of business in the industry. Talking to partners, talking to customers, doing anything that you can to make the experience the best. That's what you're going to get out of it, right? You're going to get out what you take out of it. And if you don't take anything out of it, then of course you're just going to say it wasn't worth anything. But that doesn't mean that it's not worth something to somebody else. So that's the first thing I'll say. I have no opinion one way or another. Events they're what you make of it. If there's anything negative about the events, it's just that. It's the mindset. It's showing up, thinking you're not going to get anything out of it. You're probably not. If you have that mindset, you're already setting yourself up for failure.
Welcome to the Roofing Millionaires podcast. Today, I sit down with Holliday, co-founder of Inc. and now Vice President of Customer Success at Whammy AI. We discuss why some contractors still resist technology, how AI is changing the claims process, and the basic problems roofing companies continue to ignore, from answering the phone to maintaining enough cash reserves to survive insurance payment delays. Ryan also reflects on building Inc., starting a new chapter, and how entrepreneurship and serious health challenges changed his definition of success. Before we get into the conversation, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you are listening this on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Roofing Millionaires podcast, Ryan. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. How are you feeling, and how has been this year for you so far?
Feeling great. This year has been fantastic. I had a pretty big change in my life where I transitioned from my company Inc. to a new company. And so Inc. is a payments company that I co-founded nearly 10 years ago. And now I am the Vice President of Customer Success over at Whammy AI. So still within the same industry, but excited for the new opportunity.
Okay. I didn't know that, by the way. Thank you I have my questions about Inc., but we'll definitely discover what you are doing with this new venture as well. But before that, would you briefly introduce yourself for the audience, so people who are either watching or listening to this show, they know that how did you end up in the industry? Whereas I am assuming a lot of folks already know you, but even if someone doesn't know the experience and the exposure that you have in the roofing industry, so would you like to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. So I'm Ryan Holliday. I am the co-founder of Inc. And Inc. is a payments company that was built to manage and process property claim checks. And our goal at that company is to eliminate paper checks entirely from property claims. I had gotten into the industry as a roofing salesman. And so when I moved to Florida back in 2016, I got started with a company in Jacksonville, started learning the industry. And my first year in that business, I just experienced what it was like to deal with property claims and discovered that it was quite cumbersome to deal with the payments that the carriers had issued. So I kind of out of that frustration of dealing with property claim checks, my business partner, who is a public adjuster, and I got together one day and we decided to put an end to the madness, as we call it. And that was the day that we, came up with the idea for Inc.
Okay, that's amazing. And I would just say one thing here, that as you are not part of Inc. anymore, do you mind discussing that what Inc. is doing and what have you been doing with the Inc. and how are you guys operating? Or do you feel that now your sole purpose of serving is with the new company and we should have this interview for the new company that you are working with?
Yeah. So Inc. is obviously still growing. We have a tremendous team in place over there. And now they are really growing into some more enterprise servicing roles, in the sense that, you have a lot of different stakeholders who are involved with a property claim payment. You have the insurance company, you have the mortgage company, you have obviously the insureds who are receiving the funds, and then they have to pay the professionals that they're working with. So you could have claims professionals like an insurance company, or I'm sorry, a property attorney, you got a public adjuster, and then you also have contractors who need to be paid to repair the property. So all these different entities that are part of the process that Inc. services, now we're really moving more into partnerships with the mortgage companies. And that's exciting because we can obviously speed the process up for everybody, but really for those entities, we are saving them a tremendous amount of time and frustration and just having to deal with a paper check. So that's where Inc. is now. I imagine that over the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot of advancement on the enterprise side of the fence with a lot more mortgage partnerships, and hopefully some adoption soon from the insurance companies, because our goal has always been and always will be to eliminate that paper check for the process. So that way folks can be paid expeditiously. So that's where Inc. is. And then, for me, I feel like my contributions to Inc. as a company kind of plateaued, if you will. I think we have some very talented individuals on that team who are going to take the company much further than I could at this point. And there was an opportunity at Whammy AI, and Whammy is a platform that's designed for claim auditing. And the long and short of how to describe Whammy, because it has so many fantastic features, but the best way to describe it is that you can ingest all of the claim information that you need to, so that everything can be analyzed, from the policy to the damage photos to the correspondence regarding the claim, just essentially making sure that all the information is there that's needed either for litigation or defense of that certain matter. So it's an agnostic platform that is built for everybody who is working in claims. So we have property attorneys, personal injury attorneys, forensics companies, insurance companies, contractors. We have all sorts of customers that are taking a look at this product to see how it's going to, help them manage their workflow.
Okay. Okay, now before we talk about claim audit and everything that you have just mentioned, let me ask you that you are the co-founder of Inc. and you just mentioned that now it is developing into an enterprise solution. So what are the challenges that you feel Inc. will be facing? Because I still see, like before this interview, I was talking to some of the contractors and they still have that old mindset, I would say, that I can have someone in-house and I can handle all of this by myself instead of having a software handling the insurance payments and the mortgage and everything for me.
Sure. So everybody's welcome to run their business the way they like. I would say that the majority of folks these days are more apt to use technology to solve a problem. And statistically, the number of people who would rather pay for things electronically is certainly the majority these days. So there's going to be stragglers, and eventually they'll, grow out of it, as I say, because they're just going to end up ultimately retiring, and then the fresh faces are going to come into the industry. And I would say that most of the up and comers are technology forward. So.
Okay. And you talk a lot about contractors maths. You talk about like sales activities and non-sales activities. So what is contractors maths to you? What does it mean?
I'm sorry, contractors?
maths. Like I have seen you in the videos, you were talking about like there are non-sales activities and sales activities that roofing contractors are indulged in, but you need to to be focusing upon the sales activities that are in your business. That was like an old video that you had on YouTube, but are you familiar? Like, do you remember discussing all of that?
It might have been a little while ago. I put out numerous videos, but I don't recall that conversation.
Okay.
So I think that contractors in particular are very proud of what they've built if they've, been successful in growing a company. And sometimes when you do that, once you get to a certain point, you want to hang on to that success and it's difficult to change. Right. And contractors sometimes, once they have found something that works and works well, they stick with that and they don't, change from that. And that's fine. I'm not here to change anybody's business. I'm here to present opportunities that could help them manage their business more effectively. It could save them time. That's what I'm all about. I'm a process guy. I like solving problems. I like keeping things moving efficiently and effectively. And that's really the goal of Inc., right? Because when you're dealing with a paper payment that needs to be managed and endorsed and verified by numerous parties, obviously, the only ways that you can get that done are by physically taking that, check around town or mailing it around. And that's all just an antiquated process. And with Inc., you can manage that process digitally. So it's really up to the folks that are using the platform and how they want to use it. But not every aspect of the Inc. platform needs to be used in your process. And so I feel like you have the option to kind of mold the way Inc. works around your current process and make the best of it. Right. But again, some contractors are old school, like you said, and they just don't want to change and they just want to keep doing things the way that they used to. So.
Okay. And speaking of that, would you walk me through like what you are doing with the claim audits that you just mentioned with this new platform, considering the fact that you mentioned that not every feature that a platform has needs to be used in your business or in your process. So what are you exactly doing here and how it is going to help someone who is running a roofing company?
So I would say that with Whammy, I'm not sure that Whammy is extremely applicable to a roofing company. Really, it's more for analyzing policy documents, analyzing damage photographs, analyzing correspondence regarding the claim. And so keep in mind that our main customers over at Whammy are property attorneys. I'm sorry, personal injury attorneys. These are defense firms
Okay.
that are representing insureds whenever they have a claim against their insurance company. And then sometimes they have to, take it to legal. Right. And then we also have the other side of the fence. On the carrier side, there are, defense attorneys and also insurance companies that are taking a look at the technology. But what Whammy does is it will analyze all this information. It'll analyze claim estimates. It'll analyze policy documents. It'll analyze photos. It'll analyze any correspondence that has been coming back and forth regarding the claim. It'll help you prepare certain documents that are necessary for the claim and the litigation. And it's really to make the legal process of battling that claim from one side or the other to make that much more efficient and much, much faster. So some of the work that could take, a person hours, tens of hours, is now taking minutes in analyzing, hundreds of documents. So our system can do it in a very short period of time. So it's a huge time save and it's much more accurate, obviously, because it's completely AI forward and making a lot less mistakes than what a human would, whenever it's.
Okay. And what brought you to AI? Like, I can assume that you work with Inc., you are tech savvy, you like working with tech products and introducing solutions to the industry and working on upcoming technologies. But do you really believe that, okay, I get this, that this will help like we can process documents way faster, and it's going to help defense attorneys and everything. So do you really believe that if we just put this up against a real human being, or how the work is handled in real world, a software can still be competitive against real humans when we talk about real problems and the like challenges that require physical presence?
Yeah, so I've thought quite a bit about this from the perspective of several industries because AI is going to change the way the world works. It's not going to entirely replace humans, but it is going to enable them to achieve a lot more than what they could have without it. And so let's say you have in the case of WAMI, let's say you have a policy document that you need to read for an insured. And let's say that policy document is 100 pages. Now you would have to go through and read 100 pages of this document in order to find certain provisions or certain exclusions or certain coverages regarding that policy to see how it applies to the particular claim. And for a human to read through 100 pages accurately of a policy document, I can't imagine how long it's going to take, but it's probably going to take some time, at least a day, right? The WAMI technology can read that policy in its entirety in a matter of minutes, maybe less. It could be seconds. And the information that it gathers and the way that it gathers that data, indexes it, and relays it back to the user, there's no way that a human could do that on their own. And so to be able to do that and do that at scale with hundreds, thousands of claims, we're able to save law firms a tremendous amount of time. We're able to save forensics companies a tremendous amount of time, public adjusters, basically anybody who needs to analyze these matters and analyze the data. There's no way that they can do it better than the AI can. So once that AI produces the result, it's always there for humans to review it. It's always there for, confirmation, but to be able to extract that information, present it, and have it checked to make sure it's accurate, which in almost every case that it is, there's just no way that a human can do what the AI is doing.
Okay. And when we talk about human versus AI, you have been working with Inc. and now you are working with this platform. This is for defense attorneys, and now I would say that you have sort of transitioned. But if we talk about roofing industry specifically, since our audience is roofing contractors, you have been there, you have done that, like you have been part of all of these things for like last decade. Where do you feel that contractors, specifically if we talk about roofing contractors, they go wrong with the understanding of data and metrics? But I feel, I will share my point of view with you as well, that I feel that we have become so obsessed with the collection of data and noticing different metrics and mirroring and doing calculations on paper, that we do not know which data is actually correct for us. And even if you are using something like AI that has massive capabilities, how we can actually analyze and feed that data and use that for our advantage. So is there anything that you feel contractors do wrong and it can be corrected, whether it is their perspective or the use of data and the metrics overall?
Well, I would say that the first thing that they do wrong is they have the mindset of this is how we've always done it. So the first thing is they have to be open to change and they have to want to improve the process if they are currently implementing an antiquated process or something that can be more effective. And so I'd say that's the first mistake that they make, is being set in their ways. The second, and I would say this is probably an advantage for a contractor, but there's only so many things that you should be tracking when you are a contractor, right? There's not too many metrics that you need to pay attention to in order to be successful, but certain things that maybe they're not thinking about, like how quickly they answer the phone. I would say that the number one thing that contractors are never great at is simply communicating and answering the phone. I can't tell you how many times I've heard stories of contractors losing customers, and it's just because they were non-responsive, right? You even see people posting about it online where they're getting calls and they're trying to catch up with 12 calls that they got in that day because of, a storm that came through. And it's like, 12 phone calls, it should be entirely manageable by a company who is coming out to build your roof. In my opinion. So there's certain things that they may not be thinking about that are important, that are going to make a world of difference. And a contractor sometimes is going to think, well, why is me answering the phone quickly going to make a world of difference? They don't realize that that's just how society is these days. And they expect a quick turnaround, right? Everybody's living in an instant gratification mindset. And with that mindset comes certain expectations of, who you're dealing with and who you're working with. And for a contractor, I mean, if you call a contractor, ask a question, or you want to ask them a question or have them come out and help you out, if they don't call you back for hours, how are you going to feel whenever they're doing your work? Are you going to feel comfortable with them doing your work? Are you going to trust them because they can't even call you back in a matter of hours? And that's the beginning of that interaction. So I would say that there are certain things that contractors, look at, and they're probably not all the things that they should be looking at, but I don't think there are a lot overall. That's the good news. The good news is that for a contractor, you don't have, 100 different metrics you need to follow. You need to follow, basically your customer service. You need to, obviously keep an eye on your numbers, your net revenue, and your cost of goods, right? So I'd say those are the primary things. And then, when things go wrong, just fix it, right? Don't make excuses, just fix it. And that's really what makes a good contractor, one that answers their phone, gets the job done, make sure they keep an eye on their numbers, and and they just fix things when it happens. So
Okay. And I remember a book here from what you have said, that there is a book named "Never Sweat the Small Never Sweat the Small Stuff. It's always in the small stuff. It's always in the small things
yeah,
that we ignore." That is an amazing book. If someone is listening to this, it's definitely a book that helps you focus on the smaller things. You have been with Inc., Ryan, and I read your posts, and I saw that you guys were dealing with loans as well, like you were providing contractors with loans, if I am not wrong here. Since you were with Inc. and you were looking over all these payments and how things are being done, are there any things that you feel contractors do wrong with their finances? And I'm not talking about the contractors who have been into this industry for decades. I personally know 3 to 5 business started in like 2024 roofing businesses, and now they are not in the industry anymore. They just collapsed because they couldn't handle the cash flow, or they didn't plan anything. So you have been here, you know that how insurance company pays you, how you have to plan out the materials, and how you have to do all these things. Are there any things that you can tell these contractors from your experience, that if you are starting out, then these are the things that you need to be looking for?
that's a great question. So I would say first and foremost, contractors need to have reserves, especially if you're working in the insurance space, because you're going to have to float funds. You're going to have to cover expenses while money is coming in. And it's just the nature of insurance claims. So whenever a claim is approved, let's say it's a roof claim, the insurance company is always going to pay out what's called the ACV payment related to the policy. And that's the actual cash value payment. So it's typically never the total amount of what the roof is going to cost to replace. And so, as a contractor, you're typically getting that job started with that check, and maybe you're going to collect the deductible check from the insured. But in order to receive the rest of the money, you need to complete that job. And once that job's complete, you've got to pay your crews, you've got to pay your materials, you got to pay expenses to keep the lights on. And so all these things need to be taken care of in a timely manner, but you may not receive that back end money for another month or two from the insurance company. So unless you have a very strict accounts receivable process and perhaps a protocol where you are collecting payment from the insured, regardless of what the insurance company is doing, you're going to have cash flow issues. And so if you're running your business just based on how the insurance company is paying, you have to be prepared for, I would say, at least 3 to 6 months of just runway to make sure that you have enough to pay the bills and cover everything and grow the business while you're waiting for money to come in. So that's one of the biggest challenges I think that contractors see is that, or that they encounter, is that they do not manage their money appropriately. And, as soon as it comes in, it's right out the door. You certainly cannot do that in insurance claims. And you really cannot do that, especially after, let's say, a catastrophic event where, a hurricane comes in and you're probably writing 10 times the number of contracts that you would write in a normal year, and you're doing that perhaps in a month. You financially are probably not going to be able to support that venture. So,
Okay. And
I was just going to say, so managing your finances, I think, is the number one thing that contractors need to plan for if they're going to be serious about growing any sort of business in the industry.
okay. Do companies file more claims that they can handle as well?
Sure. Happens all the time, especially after a hurricane. I've, seen a lot of companies, especially here in Florida, they come from out of state and they see an opportunity of all this work, right? And what happens is they write all these contracts, they sign people up, and then as those claims start becoming approved by the insurance companies, they're obviously not all approved at once. All that money does not come at once. And what ends up happening is the contractors start the work on those initial jobs. And then as more money is coming in from additional jobs, they're trying to pay off the first round of jobs with the money that's coming in. And they very quickly get overwhelmed and consumed by their receivables and their payables. And what ends up happening is they go under because they don't have enough money then to complete the work or get any new jobs started. So you may think that it's a great idea to go out and write all this business, but if you financially cannot support it, then you're not going to make it through.
You started Inc. in 2017. If we go back to when you were co-founding this, or when you had this idea in your mind, do you believe that the industry or the processes have changed now with the introduction of tech? And what was in your mind when you started Inc? And what was your condition mentally when you were now getting separated from it, or just taking like a different path?
So when we first started talking about the idea of Inc., to me, it was ridiculous that these property claims were being paid on a paper check, because even back then in 2016, we had plenty of payments platforms, Venmo was around, PayPal, plenty of ways to send money electronically. And I thought, well, this is such an important matter for people. Why are we still doing it by check? So those were the first thoughts in my head. And after we did some research, we found that there were no other solutions out there to manage this process. And so it became kind of an obsession of ours. Well, if there's nothing out there that exists, we have to fix this. We have to get it done. I can tell you that over the years, certainly, this was my first major entrepreneurial journey. I've kind of been entrepreneurial all my life, but this was my largest venture to date. And I've learned quite a bit about technology, business in general, raising capital. And I will say that my view on everything, the solve at large with Inc., we always knew that it was going to be challenging. We always knew it was going to take some time. But I can tell you that technology always takes, longer than you think. Until now, I think until AI has been brought into the fold, technology prior to that always takes longer than you expect. And it's extremely difficult because we had to prove concept in many ways. First you're proving that there's a need in the marketplace, right? And then you have to prove that there's a larger market than just where you are proving the model initially. And then you have to, as we're doing now, you have to have enterprise adoption. And so out of these many levels of growth and different phases in fundraising and everything that you go through in this journey, it's very much different, even with how you're operating the business based on where you're at in fundraising. So it's a lot to navigate. It's certainly not easy. It's not for the faint of heart to grow a business like this. I mean, it's quite a roller coaster, but I think as long as you have the right team, as long as you just don't give up, and as long as you're constantly innovating and thinking of ways to make everything better, whether it's the platform, the process, how you're working with your customers, how you're out there marketing, your messaging, just everything. There's so much that goes into growing a business like this that after you go through it, it's almost like, when I think about would I do it again? Probably not. That's the only way to describe it. I don't know. Would I give up the experience? Absolutely not. It's been one of the greatest experiences in my life and probably always will be. But would I do it again had I known what I know now? Probably not. I probably would have done something different and maybe not tried to create a payments company that didn't exist. And I think about that a lot. It's like, do you want to continue in that realm of technology, especially with how things are advancing and, dealing with this startup trials and tribulations? I mean, at any moment, you could be put out of business. At any moment, you could have competition come along and just squash you. I mean, there's so many things that can happen that, that are on the back of your mind, and it's very testing. We'll say that. But knowing what I know now, I can tell you that the experience has certainly prepared me for nearly anything else that I want to take on. So I'm very grateful, for everything I've learned. I'm very grateful for all the people that I've met. I'm very grateful for everyone that believes in the company and everybody that supported the growth of the company and everybody who is part of the team now. It takes an army, right? It's just not easy. And so having done it in the environments that we did, I mean, we went through COVID. We were raising money in the most difficult fundraising environment ever. And we still made it through. I mean, we overcame some extraordinary challenges and we press on. And I think it's not just because of our perseverance, but because the industry demands a solution. It's a royal pain trying to get these payments taken care of. And if we can solve for this massive headache that affects so many different stakeholders, then the world's going to be a much better place. So we're going to get it there. It's just a much longer journey than we had anticipated.
I'm going to come back to this at the end of this interview, that this is a kind of a life question, that whether when you do all the things and when you have achieved everything, your perspective changes about the journey that you had. I'm going to discuss that at the end. But for now, you just mentioned that it was challenging. And I know as well that creating demand is something. You were out there, you were creating demand, I would say, for something that was not even in the minds of people. Like they didn't even think that this is something they should be having. So when you were out there building demand for this or just selling your idea, what are the things that you faced? Because there were so many things going on with Inc. Like people are scanning checks, homeowners are signing the checks or approving payments or stuff like that. Then there are mortgage companies out there. You are dealing with insurance. So like you are dealing with a lot of different avenues, I would say. How did you manage to build trust with each of them?
So I'd say that a lot of our traction early on came from people that we knew, that Ken and I knew. So Ken Lawler's our other co-founder at Inc. He was and still is a public adjuster in the industry. We used to work together on claims here and there, and Ken had a lot of great relationships in the industry that we were able to capitalize on. And so kind of getting getting trust from people that you knew was a good start. But getting out there, I think it wasn't until 2018, believe it or not. So the first month, so January 2018, we went to our very first industry event, and we went to the Wind conference in Orlando, really looking for just feedback. We wanted to find out what the insurance industry thought of this potential solution. And I remember going to that first event thinking, this is exciting because we're going to find out now whether or not this is a viable thing to pursue. And we came out of that conference with a bunch of companies that were interested in actually using the product. So that was exciting. And then the very next conference that we went to was the International Roofing Expo. And that was way different than the Wind conference. It was much larger, a lot of contractors. And we went there expecting to get a whole bunch of customers. And we did get quite a few leads. But really what we came out of that with was partnership interests, and a lot of other companies in the space who were excited about what we were solving. They said, you guys are the missing link as to what a lot of folks in our industry need right now. And that kind of gave us additional momentum to say, okay, this is the real thing. We need to make this happen. And just getting that validation from the industry is what continued to propel us. So I think going out there, getting feedback from your potential customers, your potential partners, all that was a catalyst to our growth in the beginning, just validation from others, and then showing them, here's what we're planning to build. Here's how it's going to work. But, it was amazing. I mean, Ken and I raised money nearly, almost $900,000. Ken says a piece of paper. It was a little more than that, but it was not compared to how everybody's raising money today with pitch decks and things like that. I mean, this was like a traditional business plan, an old school business plan. And, we were still able to get the support because people believed in what we were solving for. It was that big of a problem. So we just kept at it.
Okay. And Inc. was your first major entrepreneurial achievement, I would say. So what are the things that you feel, if you look back now, or the mistakes that you learned from Inc. that you don't want to apply in this journey that you are just beginning right now?
A mistake? Well, it's hard to say what mistakes we made at Inc. because it was a learning journey, and you can't learn without making mistakes. So Ken has another saying, you don't know what you don't know. And we only were able to progress with what we knew about the solution, what we knew about business, what we knew about just the industry in general. And we learned basically along the way. So did we make mistakes? Sure. Could I have done things differently? Could we have done things differently as an organization? Absolutely. But were they mistakes? I wouldn't say they were mistakes. I think they were just, things that we learned from. And that's the way every successful person grows and actually becomes successful, is they learn to deal with the mistakes. They learn to fail and just get back on the horse. And that's what we did. So we certainly had challenges over the years. We certainly could have done things better. We certainly probably could have gotten, places faster, but it's just how the business grew. It grew because of what we knew, how we knew to do it. And of course, we've gotten much better over the years, to have gone from not knowing anything, just an idea on literally a napkin about, how do we solve this problem? And the goal was, let's just get rid of the check. We had no idea how we were going to do it, but that was the goal. Let's just get rid of the check. That's what we decided that day that Ken and I first discussed the concept of Inc. It was Sunday, September 11th, 2016. And I could tell you where we were. We were at Miller's Ale House in south side of Jacksonville, Florida. And we were watching a football game, drinking a beer. And it was the first time we discussed it. And that's all we knew was, this is a problem. And we think the ultimate goal is to just eliminate the check. We didn't know how we were going to get there. We didn't know what we were going to build. That's all we knew. And we were able to, utilize our contacts. We were able to utilize our prior experience. Ken's obviously in the insurance space. I started learning contracting in the roofing industry and property claims, and I had a background in the mortgage industry as well. So it kind of all came together with that. We went out and reached out to some of my friends, and a very good friend of mine, Ryan Wetzel, who I've known since I was 15, and he was a lot more familiar with tech than I was, and he was able to come on and help us, build out the website and start building the first iterations of our platform. So that's just kind of how we started, and we've all grown since then. I mean, we're able to come from that to, as I've moved on to this new venture with Whammy, in a month was able to kind of come up with new processes and things that we can execute on from a customer success perspective, and how we can scale up, the experience for everybody. I mean, everything that I'm implementing at Whammy, I had no idea about. I didn't know any of this when we started Inc. So, it's been quite a learning experience, and I'm very grateful for it. Regardless of anything that happened, how we grew it, any mistakes, anything like that. I don't consider it mistakes. I consider it a learning experience for sure.
I just have 2 or 3 more questions for you. And the first one is that you have been a speaker at WTS Win the Storm conference in 2024. And if I'm not wrong, in 2025 as well. If you can correct me here if I'm wrong. I meet contractors, and there is a group of contractors that say that these conferences are beneficial to the industry. And then there are also some group of contractors, they say that these are just a way to promote products or talk about or brag about achievements of people, and nothing much beneficial for the contractors or for the roofers who are in there to learn something. The question I have for you here is that you have been a speaker at WTS, and I have had Chelsea Fover on my podcast as well. She had been on WTS. I had Lisa Cimaroli. All of you guys have been speaking at these conferences, but I never had a chance to ask someone. So now I'm asking you, what do you feel are the good sides?
So first of all, I'll say that anyone's opinion on a conference or any other educational or just anything, right? Anybody's opinion on anything is a reflection of how it's received by them. You're going to get out of it what you want. And if somebody goes to an event and they don't get anything out of it, I mean, what were they doing at the event in the first place? Or, what was their game plan? I think some of the, frustration that people have with events sometimes comes from the vendor side, because it doesn't have the attendance that they expected, right? So everybody puts money up as a vendor, they go to these events, and then if they don't get the ROI out of the event, they obviously air their frustrations, and, those mumblings happen. But in any event, if it was a slow event, we would find ways to get value out of that event, whether it was shooting content or talking to partners, talking to customers, doing anything that you can to make the experience the best. That's what you're going to get out of it, right? You're going to get out what you take out of it. And if you don't take anything out of it, then of course you're just going to say it wasn't worth anything, but that doesn't mean that it's not worth something to somebody else. So that's the first thing I'll say. I have no opinion one way or another. Events they're what you make of it. So I would say that if there's anything negative about the events, it's just that. It's the mindset. It's, showing up, thinking you're not going to get anything out of it. You're probably not. If you have that mindset, you're already setting yourself up for failure. If you go in thinking, okay, well, let's make the most of this. And even if I only talked to a handful of potential customers, I was still able to, talk to somebody about a potential partnership, or I was still able to shoot some content. I was able to get some feedback from existing customers. There's many things that a conference like that can produce, but it all comes down to what you're willing to attempt to get out of it yourself. And if it wasn't the best event for you, then that's fine. I mean, everybody has their preferences of how they like to get knowledge. Everybody, has their preferences of how they want to go out and get partnerships or potential customers. And are there better ways to acquire customers? Sure, there could be. And then there's, sometimes events are the best way to acquire customers. It just depends on, what it is that you are trying to get the word out about and what your business does and, how you approach it. So again, it all comes down to what you are actively trying to get out of that event and how you approach that. That makes it a success, not the event itself.
Okay. So now we are at the end, and let's talk about life for a moment, because you have been there, you have done that, you are sort of like you have achieved success, and everyone has a different definition of success. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned that if you had a chance to do all of it again, you wouldn't do that, and I think so. You were being sarcastic there or funny, but let me ask you that you have achieved a landmark, I would say, and you didn't plan it, like when 20 September 11, when you were sitting down with Ken, you had this idea and everything was in your mind. But now, 10 years or 11 years later, you are sitting down, everything has been achieved, everything is done now. Have it have you changed the view, or has this journey changed your view of life and success? And is there any part of you that you feel has something that still needs to be accomplished, but these things can't do that?
So first I'll say, I don't consider myself done. I think there's no such thing as done. I think life is constant growth. People have asked me before, what are you going to do when you retire? I'll never retire. I don't think I'm always going to be involved in something and trying to make an impact. I think that, one thing that everybody learns in life is that success is certainly subjective. And I think a lot of people's definitions of success early on in life are much different than what they realize true success is. And, I think my definition of success 10 years ago is different than my definition of success now. And ironically, I think the perception of, what people have of me or what we've accomplished at Inc., of being successful is different than what I think even. But I just, I'm going to keep going no matter what. I'm going to continue innovating. I think if you're an entrepreneur at heart and you have that mindset, you can't shut it off, and you can't stop thinking and thinking about opportunity or seeking opportunity. And for me, I'm always trying to, solve problems. I'm always trying to think of better ways of doing things. I'm always trying to improve certain things. And so I'll never stop doing that. So for me, success is the journey. It's being on that constant path of growth, and there is no done. There is no end. There's no finish line. And regardless of anything that I'm doing in life, whether it's, working at a startup or, advising companies on how to grow or anything like that, there's always going to be an opportunity. There's always going to be room for growth. There's always going to be a situation where I can improve. And that's just how I'm always going to live my life. I'm never going to think of it as I'm done. I've finished. But that's what I've learned is your internal definition of success is going to change as you're achieving it. And even when other people are telling you that you've achieved that success, for me personally, I don't feel that I have. I don't feel like it's an end goal. I feel like it's just a journey at this point.
You're right. And here is an analogy that I use, that success is just like climbing a mountain, that if you and if I am like trying to climb a mountain, but you are already at its peak and you have achieved that feeling. Now you are telling me that, Muhammad, don't come here. Like, if you want to, you can, but don't spend in your entire life chasing this dream. It's not that much worth it than having a family or doing stuff like that. But I won't believe you, because I am thinking that Ryan is just trying to be the solo guy who is at the peak, and he doesn't want to see me succeeding. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you have so many guys coming to you, because now you are at a position like this. They come to you for advice, I'm assuming, and they ask you about growth, they ask you about operating the company and stuff like that. But what I see, and of course you see this as well, people achieve so many things in their life, yet they are lonely, yet they don't live a life that they assumed they would be living once this XYZ goal has been achieved. So if someone asks you today, not about growing a business, but about living a life, what would be the experience or the advice you would share with them?
I know it's cliche to say it, but it's the little things in life that bring the happiness. You know, if you want to achieve success financially in life, certainly, you know, money helps, makes things easier. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to friends, family, and sharing that time together and experiences. And I can tell you because, you know, I mean, I've gone through a lot of challenges in life and in business, and certainly with my health. You know, I've stage 5 kidney disease, so you know I'm on dialysis, and you know when you are facing a life-threatening health issue, I think that's also something that helps your, or not help, but something that changes your perspective as to what's really important in life. So I think having gone through the culmination of building Inc., having that success, and just growing in business, and having all the trials, the tribulations, the ups and downs, and then also throwing on top everything else in life that can occur, and world events, and health issues. I mean, after all these things start occurring to you or happening to you, you realize that it truly is the simple things, the little things in life that bring joy and happiness. And so, everything that I'm doing, and it's really a learning experience that I'm going to be able to pass along and share with others. And at the end of the day, you can't take anything with you. So hopefully I'm able to make an impact while I'm here, and I can, help others to do the same. And that's what life is all about. I've always wanted to live a life where I can be impactful and I can help others. And Inc. is it, and if Whammy is it, and anything else that I'm doing is able to accomplish that, where people can live an easier life, or people can grow, and I can help people understand that this is where you're going to find your internal success. Then to me, that's the success. That's the journey. That's the accomplishment for me in life.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. My last question to you, Ryan, is that so many young dudes nowadays, they follow influencers on the internet. And this is a life question, not a roofing question, I would say. And everyone tells you to get obsessed with work. And I highly appreciate those guys. Because you and I, we do work as well. But what I believe is that you shouldn't tie your identity solely to the work that you do in your life. It should have other small things that you can just enjoy as well. But there are two group of people that, in my experience, I see in the world. One are the people who have this thing engraved in their souls, like they can't live without work, or they are just made for work. That's fine with them. The other group, they are the people who want to achieve something, and I think so these are in majority. But when they see that there is no other way, that you have to work so hard that you even have to forget your health, your identity, your family, your friends, and your relationships, they think that this is the only way to achieve success. But when they do so, they realize that what they left in this entire journey of chasing success was was way worthy than the success itself. So if Ryan Holiday is sitting down today with, let's just say, a teenager or someone in their 20s, how would you suggest them to create core values of their life so that they can end up having a life that is full of meaning instead of just having success that is meaningless?
Number one, you have to believe in yourself in order to achieve what you want to achieve. And if you can do that, I think anything is possible. A lot of people they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe in their abilities to go out and accomplish things that other people have. And I think it holds them back from that. So I think the first thing is you have to believe in yourself. The second is you have to be willing to learn. And the third is, along the way, you're going to find out what it is that you're passionate about. And no matter what, I think you should always, do what you're passionate about, regardless of what it is, regardless of anything that anybody else says. If you're passionate about something, that's what you need to be doing. You should always be chasing after what you love to do, because then it's not work. It's your passion. And, that's how you're going to lead the most rewarding life, is doing what you love. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or anybody else says or what their opinion is. It's your life. So however that comes together with family, with friends, with, your career, it'll all work out. But at the end of the day, doing what makes you happy is what's going to be the most rewarding. It's not money. It's not, trying to keep up with society or following trends or anything like that. All that's great, for the time being. It might be fun, but the things that really drive you and the things that you're passionate about and the things that get you out of bed every day, those are the things that you need to pursue. And those are the things in life that are going to make you happy. I do appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast today. And if there's an opportunity in the future to have a chat again, please let me know. But thank you again for having me. And I certainly enjoyed the conversation as well.
Thank you for your time once again. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Mohammed.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.